Hey, it's Nikki Llewellyn, and you're on Gut Plus Science. This podcast is on a mission to increase engagement at work. And on this show, we equip CEOs and people-first leaders of all levels to make impact. Let's get to it. I am excited to have a friend and content expert join Gut Plus Science to inspire, educate, and walk alongside us to navigate important diversity, equity, and inclusion topics that will help us move people forward. And it's Brian McComak. Brian is passionate about creating human-centered workplace cultures and has over 25 years of experience to share with us. Brian, you go.
Hello, everyone. This is Brian McComak, your DEI expert on the Gut Plus Science podcast. I am so incredibly grateful to be with all of you today, and I hope in the coming months that we'll explore topics and tools and tips that will be beneficial for you as you lean in as an ally, as a coworker, as a leader, as a manager, as an employee, and try to be part of the change that needs to happen so we can create workplaces where humans thrive. So let's dive in. Let's go back to May 2020. 2 years ago, when the pandemic was ravaging the planet and impacting all of our lives in significant ways, and certainly still does today in so many instances. During that same month, George Floyd was murdered, and so many of us, for the first time, really took notice and began to understand the impact of systemic oppression on marginalized communities, and started to ask, why is this the way it is? Why can't it be different? What can I do? How can I be part of that change? I am so grateful that I was one of those people who started to ask those questions through a new lens, started to understand systemic oppression in a different way, and the impacts of racism and transphobia and homophobia and misogyny and sexism and ableism. These are realities that are just part of daily life, and they have a real impact on real humans. And we can do better, though. To do better, we have to start having conversations that many of us weren't equipped to have or aren't equipped to have, that we were told to avoid. There are topics that we tucked away or hid behind a curtain, or just sort of glanced past and pretended it wasn't real. Well, after that tragic day in May of 2020, we all realized, I hope we all realized, that we could no longer ignore these tragic impacts on other humans, and we each have a responsibility to be part of that change. So what I wanted to talk about today is, how do we have those conversations when most of us weren't taught to lean into these sensitive, complex, emotional, sometimes charged conversations where we start to understand the reality of systemic oppression on us and each other? So I'd like to offer a few suggestions for how to lean in to navigating sensitive conversations. First, practice the pause. This is a tool that I learned a few years ago that's made a big difference for me. The practice the pause starts with 5 questions. Does it need to be said? Does it need to be said right now? Does it need to be said by me? Can I say it with compassion, care, and respect? Can I say it in a way that the other person can hear it? Those questions have helped me on more occasions than I can count to just take a deep breath, to pause, to listen, to reflect, and to not let emotion guide my actions or my words. And that leads me to the second tip, which is be curious. I think that strikes me most of what I've learned in the last couple of years is some of what I knew and thought and believed was accurate or right or valid. And there was so much that I just missed and didn't fully appreciate or understand, even as a human who wanted to do good in the world, as a person who believed in creating environments that welcomed everyone. There was just so much I didn't know. And I won't pretend that I know all the answers today. This work, this commitment to diversity and inclusion is a lifelong journey, and it's a never-ending learning experience. And I love it. I'm here for it. And that means that I have to be curious when someone offers me a new perspective or starts to share something personal with me or tell me a story about how they're feeling about something happening in the world around us. I try to pause, I try to listen, I try to ask questions. And those questions I try to ask questions to learn and not questions to teach. Because I know that when I ask the questions to teach, the other person knows that I'm trying to share something with them rather than to learn from what they're offering me. And lastly, in that same vein, be empathetic, lean into empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. So while you're practicing the pause and being curious and asking questions to learn, those steps, they give you the opportunity to really listen and to empathize with the experience of another person. And that is how we build true connection. That is how we build bridges of trust. And those bridges of trust are essential foundations to us creating shared humanity and workplaces that work for all of us. So those are a few tips and suggestions from me, and they're tools that I use and try to lean into every day as I am doing this work to create human-centered workplace cultures. I'd love to hear from you. You can always reach me on LinkedIn. You can find me at Brian McComak, which is Brian. Last name is Mccomak. And let me know what you think of this episode and what topics you'd like to hear about and what tools you use for navigating sensitive conversations. Oh, and that reminds me, later this month, Hummingbird Humanity, the firm that I have the privilege and honor to lead, we are releasing a new resource guide about navigating sensitive conversations. So if you'd like to get a copy of that guide, visit our website, hummingbirdhumanity.com, and sign up for our weekly newsletter to make sure that you get your copy. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for, again, inviting me into your space. I hope that you enjoyed this first episode, and I look forward to returning next month. Until then, stay safe and be well.
We just left the world a little bit better. Now go do something with it.